Okay, so here's where that part that I kind of squeezed in before, that they want you to know that the length of the loop of Henle is one of a million examples actually of evolutionary adaptations to a particular environment, dry or wet. And so they don't put any specific animals or things in here, but this is the general concept that involves your knowledge that the loop of Henle can help you squeeze water out of your surroundings, out of your blood, basically, or excuse me, out of your nephron tubes, and therefore help you maintain water levels. So if you have a longer loop of Henle, you can live in drier places. So if they tell you the story of, again, a desert mammal, um, and ask you what does this say about their loop of Henle's length, you would predict longer because, again, the loop of Henle lets you squeeze more water out. In contrast, if you live in a watery environment, that would suggest that your loop of Henle's would be shorter. So what if a beaver had a long loop of Henle? Well, it's again a cost benefit kind of thing. What's it cost to build a loop of Henle at all? It costs part of your lunch, right? You're building it from your nutrients in your lunch using also the energy from ATPs. So if you can have mutations happen that cause your loop of Henle's to not grow very long, you're saving nutrients that you could use for some other purpose because a longer loop of Henle wouldn't be an advantage to you. The shorter loop of Henle is not a hindrance because you don't have water problems, and what you've saved is, again, nutrients. Okay, so that I've put up enough times, I think. So here, just some real quick temperature stuff, because temperature didn't make as specifically as water conservation, water regulation, and urea getting rid of in the syllabus of both AP and IB, but they could tell you a temperature regulation story because a lot of it has to do with water, and water is a big topic. This I threw in here. This again was just like last year. This paper was published. How can a cell sense heat? That became the question. Well, basically, they have identified and narrowed down, I think, 4 genes that produce a protein, polypeptide, right? And by combining these different polypeptides in different ways to produce a channel protein that responds to temperature changes by opening or closing, right? This is how they've discovered nerve cells can sense heat, those ones that do. And again, a lot of those are in your hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is like a big regulator part of your brain, which we'll get to later. So again, these are ion channels, right? They can be opened and closed. These are therefore gated channels, we call them. So again, this story, if you're told this story, they would expect you to be able to connect it to all different kinds of bits of knowledge, like active and passive transport, what kind of things would need a channel, charged things like ions, all that stuff, plus also what is this kind of regulation if the temperature goes up, that increase sensed by now nerve cells with the help of these specific receptors, right? They then trigger signal transduction pathways that send a message to this part of your brain that sends a message to, like, your sweat glands to say be active and do sweat. What does that do to your body temperature? The evaporation of sweat, it sends it in the opposite direction of what the stimulus was. That's why this is negative feedback. Okay, so this is just detail. Again, you don't need to know all this detail. I just think it's a kind of a neat story because this is also very common in evolution. These channels that help respond to temperature also are part of your food tasting system. Kind of neat. This I threw in here. This was part of AP math. And if they describe this to you, they could still make it as part of. The definition of what is called the Q10 effect is that the rate of a reaction that's catalyzed by enzymes, like basically they all are, more or less, increases 2 to 3 times for every 10 centigrade temperature, 10 degree centigrade temperature increase. That's known as the Q10 effect. So if they gave you a specific number like Q10 for this particular reaction is 2.7, they would expect you to be able to do that. Like here, I use 2.5 as an example. They would expect you to be able to do that math. So I don't think, I forget if Q10 effect is in the syllabus and on your formula sheet anymore for AP, but if it does, even if it's not, if they told you this, they would expect you to be able to apply that math. Okay. So here I'm just going to use this as an example again of a story they could tell you, and they could tell it in diagram form and then ask you about negative feedback questions. Do you understand what negative feedback is? Do you understand signal molecules? Do you understand responses? Because they did put one chemical in the, again, red ink is again the IB syllabus, red or purple. They did put one specific chemical in there, and they might ask you what it's secreted by, what gland, which is not hard to remember, thyroid gland. Thyroxine is the protein hormone, and it helps regulate metabolic rate. What does that mean more or less? It means Krebs cycles, respiration, glycolysis Krebs cycles, because those are the most of the reactions that happen in cells that generate energy are those reactions, since every cell does those. So what this says is if you're feeling a little chilly, this chemical secreted by that gland, which is up in your throat, by the way, by that gland is going to circulate around, bump into all of your cells basically, and tell them to do more Krebs cycle things, and therefore make more temperature. You know, that's third law, right? The result of any reaction is always going to be some heat lost. Well, this time the heat's doing some good. It's on its way out of your body where it won't be able to do any more good, but this time on its way out it does good. So here what we have is here. Okay, so there are several mechanisms involved here, all of which have a signal and a response, so you could be asked questions about that. Sweat glands are one of those we talked about, the shivering when it's cold. But here's the one that ooh, hold on, I'm sorry. I should have prepped myself better because I thought, and I'm wrong. I thought thyroxine was in this diagram. Okay, so I'm gonna have to add it. Sorry. So when the temperature is too low, so there's the stimulus, right? Temperature is too low. That's sensed once again by cells in that part of your brain. That's the hypothalamus, sensed in the hypothalamus. That sends a message to your thyroid gland in your throat. That's your throat. There's you, right? And your thyroid gland secretes this thyroxine, and thyroxine sends a message to, again, all of your cells that says, do more Krebs cycle things, do more metabolism, mostly, again, glycolysis Krebs cycle, and therefore release heat. So as your body temperature rises because of that, eventually a message might go to your hypothalamus that says, this is too high. And again, those messages are about heat, not a particle in this case, right? Like most messages we've talked about, but heating up those molecules we focused on a few slides back will get triggered ion channels, which are the heart and soul of, as we're going to see, a nervous system, a messaging system that causes things to respond by doing different things, like sweating, like having capillaries dilate or whatever. We're going to watch a neat little doggy little video about all this stuff. However, just as is, the only part of thermoregulation, or mostly the only part that's specific in the IB syllabus is this part, and really hardly any of it made the AP syllabus, the new AP syllabus. So here we have another story that we've talked about that in the AP syllabus is those ice fish, if you remember them, very neat story. Also is about mutation stuff, is about evolution stuff, and so they can be it can be fit into here. The evolution in some things of uh, molecules that help protect against cold, and cryo is a prefix that means cold. So that's why cryoprotectant. They are in effect like the antifreeze that is in our cars. They, as the temperature gets really low, they prevent ice crystals from forming, therefore prevent the freezing that would make body chemistry impossible. And so in very cold watery places or in some other terrestrial places, like some frogs you might read about in this chapter if you're in IB senior class. Very neat story. That's part of the story, again, that lots of principles could be worked into, but not a specific need to know story. We're done. And he doesn't bang into the pier there, but this was a pretty neat day. These guys were really getting a lot of air and made for some neat photos. And I hope you enjoyed that because I'm headed to the beach right now. Bye bye.